Hello and welcome to Avenging Past 7. This is day 305 of our free-to-play farming guide. And I need to tell you, I have been so excited to record today's video. Last night, I was playing Overwatch, and in between games, I was scrolling through Facebook, and a Star Wars page that I follow, I don't even remember their name, shared a picture that compared the sequel trilogy to Ahsoka. And it was really interesting. As you guys know, I don't like the sequel trilogy. I don't like the writing. I don't like the story. I don't like the characters that they made, the story they take each character through. I don't like the sequels. And as you know, I have liked Ahsoka. And so I really want to go through this comparison and talk about what they compared and why they say the sequels in Ahsoka are the same, and how I think they're different, even while being the same. So I'll read through this to you, and I might even go through and pop it up on the screen for y'all to be able to see throughout this. The original team isn't as close as they used to be. Most went their separate ways. There's a map that leads to someone important. Both heroes and villains want it. There's a potential new Jedi who needs help, but their master walks out on them. And people are worried because a presumed dead villain has seemingly returned. Now I'm going to go through each part, because I think that all of these points comparing the two are completely valid. I think that they are completely valid. Now, the person who made it says that because of these points, you should not be able to dislike the sequels and like Ahsoka, because they are saying it's basically the same story. I'm going to break that down and say why you can dislike one and like the other, because even though I do agree they are essentially the same story so far, they're doing things differently. So for the first point, the original team is not as close as they used to be, and most went their separate ways. As we all know, with the sequels, when The Force Awakens start, we find out that Han and Chewie are still hanging out together, but Han and Leia are no longer together. We find out that Luke is not around anymore. And R2 has just shut himself down. So right there we see, pretty much the main group of people from the originals have gone their separate ways. We see, and when Ahsoka starts, we see that Hera is a general for the Republic. Through The Mandalorian, we know that Zeb is in the Republic, but not around his friends that much, it seems. We know that Chopper is still with Hera. So we have Hera and Chopper together. Zeb is off on his own. Sabine is over on Lothal, just kind of moping around. And Ezra has not really isolated himself, but has become isolated from the group, has gone missing. So right there we have two groups of people that had an original show that movie or show that we watched. And when we come back to them years later, they're separated. How do I say that those are different from each other? Well, here's what I would say is different right off the bat. With the sequels, we don't have any pre-context to why they're separated. We're learning why they're separated after they're separated. And so fans have had 40 years to fantasize, to read books, read comics, and fantasize about all the awesome adventures Han, Luke, Leia have gone on together. And now Disney's releasing movies that say, nah, there's no happy ending. So that's another end, okay? For Rebels and Ahsoka, the ending of Ahsoka hints at them being somewhat separated. By the ending of Ahsoka, we already know that Ezra's been separated from the group. We know that Sabine is still on Lothal. We know that Hera and Chopper are still, or have joined the Republic. And I don't remember what they say about Zeb, but we already kind of get the hint that not everything was fantastic for the group. The ending of their story, they were kind of separated. So then for the next 10 years, maybe less, but maybe let's say 10 years, fans get to fantasize about, I wonder what they did during this time. We know, like a 5 years later point of, they're not all together anymore. I wonder what went on. So fans already have the pretext and the understanding that this is not a happy ever after ending for the group. At least by the time Ahsoka would start. They already have the pretext that, going into the show, they're not around each other anymore because we know where their story ended so many years ago. So the difference, I would say, between the sequels and between Ahsoka is while you have an original group of friends that are no longer around each other, that have gone their separate ways, Rebels set that up. The originals did not. So the difference is the setup and the expectations of the fans walking in versus, I guess, for both sides. I think that yeah. So let's go on to point 2. There's a map that leads to someone important. Both heroes and villains want it. This one's an interesting one. I really do find this one to be an interesting one. With The Force Awakens, there's this supposed map that leads to where Luke is hiding. The First Order knows about it. The Resistance knows about it. And both groups are after it. In Ahsoka, there's this supposed ancient map that Ahsoka and Morgan Elsbeth both assume lead to Thrawn and Ezra. And so both groups are after this map. It's interesting because I'm trying to think through what is, if I'm going to take the stance of Ahsoka is doing it better, how is Ahsoka doing it better? And here's what I think. I'm going to start with Ahsoka this time because I understand that one a bit better. The map that Ahsoka and Morgan Elsbeth are both looking for does not lead to Thrawn and Ezra. The map that they are looking for leads to a point that an ancient civilization learned the Purgil go to. This map is not about Thrawn and Ezra. This map is about the migration of the Purgil. Now, we all know that Thrawn and Ezra were taken away by the Purgil, so it would make sense that Thrawn and Ezra would be at a spot where the Purgil migrate to. And so, because an ancient civilization grew to understand the Purgil and made a map about them, people today, I'm saying today, can follow this map to find the spot where Thrawn and Ezra likely are. Not because this map leads to Thrawn and Ezra, but because this map follows the migration of the Purgil. Now, the map that they are hunting down in The Force Awakens does not technically lead to Luke. The map leads to a planet where the original or an ancient Jedi temple was created. And so I can understand you can defend it in the same way. You can defend the same thing. Of the map does not lead to Luke, but leads to a planet that Luke is likely on. With this one, I don't know if I really have a way to say that one did it better than the other, and I think mostly because I don't fully understand the map from The Force Awakens. Of course, I didn't dive as deep into that one, trying to understand it. So y'all can comment down below on that one. Which one do you think did it better? Because I don't know. For the next point, there's a potential new Jedi who needs help, but their master walks out on them. And this one I don't think holds up nearly as well as the map point does. In The Force Awakens, we have Luke, who Rey comes to him for training, and Luke says no. And then Luke trains her, but it's not really much of a training. It's more just making fun of her. And so that happens. With Ahsoka doesn't really walk out and refuse to train Sabine in the Ahsoka show. It's that it already happened in the past. So the difference here, the big difference here is that we're seeing a Jedi who has been looked up to for generations, for the past 40 years, quit teaching because one student went evil. One student, Kylo Ren, turned against him, turned to the dark side, and Luke refuses to teach anyone. And when Rey comes to him, he refuses. In Ahsoka, we find out that Ahsoka once quit teaching Sabine And now Sabine has come back and wants to be taught again. And throughout the course of the show, we will see how that goes. Since the show's not over, we don't know if Ahsoka walks out on her again or if she stands through it. I don't think that she's going to walk out on him. I think that we might find out some different things happen, but I don't think she's going to quit as the teacher anymore. So the difference here, again, I don't think the difference is what happened. I think the difference is how they portrayed it. Ahsoka, we learned that Ahsoka didn't just quit because Sabine went wrong. They both quit on each other. They were both difficult to work with for each other, and therefore they split their separate ways. But we're not seeing that Ahsoka, either one of them, was okay with quitting training. It was difficult for both of them, and they didn't really want to. It was just, they were difficult on each other. But we're seeing Ahsoka, we're seeing both sides willing to get back together with each other, to train with each other again, to work together again. With Luke, we don't see that much about it. We don't see his relationship with Ben Solo before anything happened. We don't know what it was like training Ben Solo. We saw two different versions of the same knight that we don't fully really know which one is the real version. We know Luke's version of things, we know Kylo's version of things, but we don't know which one we can trust. You would assume Luke's, but we didn't get a definitive version, in my opinion. And then finally, people are worried because a presumed dead villain has seemingly returned. Palpatine and Thrawn. Again, yes, that is true. Both the sequels and Ahsoka are doing that. But the difference is how they're presenting it and what came before. With Thrawn, he was presumed dead, but we never saw him die. We know that he was taken away by the Purrgil. Potentially, potentially at some point he could return. He could land on a distant galaxy planet, survive this whole time, and be rescued. Palpatine was dropped into the reactor core of the Death Star 2 and exploded. I completely agree that plenty of times in Star Wars we have seen people return from the dead. Plenty of times in Star Wars we have seen Sith come back centuries later, thousands of years later, after their death. I think that works in Star Wars. I don't really think it's a somehow Palpatine returned is a good way to explain it off. But some of my favorite books I really need to go through again are the Jedi Training Academy books, which has an ancient Sith Lord that used to reside in the Massassi Temple, come back, take possession of one of Luke's students, and then the new Jedi Padawans and Luke have to fight back against this person. It's happened before. I think that the sequels did it poorly because they didn't really explain it well, and they made it kind of a joke. But I think it works in the universe. However, and so, Ahsoka did it better because they set up that Thrawn could return in a very real, in an easy way for fans to understand. So while I think these 2 points in the Star Wars universe are very similar, and I do agree, I think that Ahsoka is doing it better because they're setting things up in a Rebels for things to happen in Ahsoka. They're setting things up ahead of time, and they're doing things in a way that they can explain and defend to the fans, and the fans can easily accept that, yeah, that happened. They don't make it hard to accept or a joke. So if you stuck around this long, I'm really thankful that you did. Please comment down below. Let me know what you think about each one of these points. Let me know what your thoughts are on all of this. And as always, I hope you'll have a fantastic day. And may the Force be with you.